we're going to end with a quick little segment for what we think is the most important and the least important drills at the combine for all these positions overall. So Matt, I'm going to let you go ahead and have the first pick. What is the overall most important position at the combine for every position in general, in your opinion?
The most important drill in general is got to be the 40. It's the money drill. It's what everybody really tunes in for. But other than just being the most fun to watch, it's also just make or break for a lot of these guys, for wide receivers, for DBs, for running backs, for tight ends. The list goes on. The 40 time really shows a lot, whether it's that short yardage burst or the long speed. You really get to show it off in the 40. It's by far the most important.
Yeah, I think it is too. We're in lockstep there. That, like I said, for most of the show, it's an overall test of athleticism. And if there's an overall test of athleticism, the guys that are usually the more athletic are going to succeed. And that's just how the nature of an athletic sport goes, especially a sport that's as physical as football. The guys that are the better athletes are usually going to win. Specifically, I want to say, kind of like if I really had to say something, it's the 10-yard split for me, where the 40 is the most important drill, but the 10-yard split is the most important data that we're going to get out of all these guys position wide. Because explosion and ability to go from a standing start, from standing still to running, and how fast you can cover about 10 yards of space in a short amount of time is what all of football is all about at practically every position, because very rarely are you going to be running 40 yards down the field unless you're a receiver run and go route, or unless you're a DB covering him. More often than not, it's not going to be that long of a run that you're going to have to make, and it's going to have to be a lot shorter. It's going to have to be a lot quicker. It's going to have to happen a lot faster. So for the 10-yard split in particular, that's huge for me for every position, where if you're a defensive lineman and you have a good 10-yard split, it shows that you have a good first step, that you can explode out of your stance, that you can be potentially an effective pass rusher or penetrator just off speed alone, being able to beat guys into the backfield. If you're a linebacker, it shows your ability to trigger and come downhill and how much ground you can cover. Can you beat the running back to the gap? Can you get to the angle before, the wide receiver gets in on the dig route and break up the pass? For DBs, it's the ability to explode out of your stance as a DB and run down the field. Can you turn and run? Your ability to drive, like I was mentioning with Brandon Eccles on pick sixes, on out routes. There's so much to learn from the 10-yard split, because how you react in a short amount of time and what you do in 2 to 3 second bursts is all what football is all about. And that's why, for me, it's by far the most important thing we will learn from the combine for any of these positions. How do they do in the 10-yard split? How much ground did they cover in that first 10 yards from that standing start? Because that's the most important aspect for me. It's, can you be an explosive athlete for 2 to 3 seconds at a time?
Yeah. And lucky for scouts, they get to get all this information from one drill, the 40.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Matt, go ahead and tell us what, in your opinion, is the least important drill in the combine overall. The one that we're not really going to learn too much from in general for all of these positions, but obviously all of these drills are valuable. Otherwise, we wouldn't have players doing them. But what is the one that we really kind of don't put too much stock into, that isn't going to make or break any of these guys? Or maybe it will for some positions, but not for all of them.
Overall, it's hard to say. Strength is something that's important for so many. Agility is also. So I wouldn't say it's any of the major metric driven drills. I would have to go more specific and just say it's the throwing drills for quarterbacks, because like we said, specifically for quarterbacks, it's all about the interviews. So them throwing really isn't going to move many needles.
Yeah, it probably isn't. I do think there is something to take from mechanics, specifically for guys where if they had mechanic issues in college in the weeks and months that they've been training for the combine, have they done any improvement in that aspect? Have they worked with any private coaches? Do they look like they've studied their own tape and improved? There is something there. I can definitely agree that overall it probably is the least important because there are so many factors that make it difficult. The chemistry with the receivers being the main one, uncomfortability of the environment. You don't know how specific guys are going to run specific routes at specific depths. There's a bunch of different reasons for why the throwing drills could be off, and you can definitely not gather a lot of data from it. If a quarterback has really, really good tape and then doesn't do so well in the throwing drills at the combine, it's not going to make or break him as a prospect. I can definitely see that being a good pick. It's not mine, though, because I actually have one that, like you said, I think all of the main position testing drills are important. But if there is one that I think is the least important, and I was narrowed down to that 5, I'm going to say it's the bench press. And the reason I'm going to say it's the bench press is because there is so much variability in arm length and technique. And it's really hard to translate that 1-to-1 and say some guy had a good bench press, so he is going to be really strong. Or some guy had a bad bench press, so he's not strong at all. Like we've mentioned, arm length is such a huge factor. If you have longer arms, it's so much harder to be good at the bench press because you're having to extend that weight so much further and lock it out for longer. It is a lot more difficult. It's harder on your body to push that weight, the 225 pounds that you're pushing, that high up in the air. And if you're a guy with shorter arms, it gives you a little bit of an advantage to crank out more reps because you're not having to go as far. On top of that, if you're a receiver, what good does the bench press do you? That you're not really getting too much out of that. Obviously, again, you want guys to be strong. You want them to take it seriously and be an athlete as an NFL player. But if I'm a receiver, I care much more that you're practicing your fluidity and your agility and your flexibility than that you're getting rocked up to the point where, you're able to rip out a ton of reps on the bench. Would it be great if you're DK Metcalf? Yeah, but DK Metcalf is a unicorn and no one's expecting every wide receiver to look like that. So overall, I think it has some positions like we mentioned with the tight ends where it's really, really important. But if you're a running back and you're really quick and shifty and elusive and you can run through tackles with lower body strength like Michael Carter, does anyone remember Michael Carter's bench press? I don't remember it being anything that blows the doors off anybody. Does anyone care? No. So if I had to pick one of these, I really do think it is the bench press. I'm not an advocate for removing it whatsoever, so I don't want anyone to take it that way. Like, again, I think all these drills are very important, and they all have their merits. But overall, I think it's the least translatable of the major drills, and there are other ways to determine upper body strength that might be better off in the future, maybe looking into for the NFL to get into testing.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of variability there that kind of waters down the effectiveness of the drill itself. But even then, I feel like there's still a lot that we can taken away from it. Like you said, it's more of an attitude check, right. And so I do see the value just in that.
Yeah, it has value. All these drills have value. The combine is really, really important. And for anyone that says that it's not, they're wrong, because it's a litmus test for, are you smart enough to stay out of trouble long enough before you go? Are you going to do well in interviews? Have you been training? Have you been prepping your body? Have you been looking ahead to what the drills are going to be and practicing them? The NFL is looking at all of these little details on top of the actual results of the on-field workouts that matter so much. So this is going to be a huge week for these prospects. Hopefully we have done a good job of breaking things down for you to understand the combine as a whole. But it's going to be really, really big, and make sure that you guys are paying attention to these drills in particular. Most importantly, those 40s, like we said, look at relative athletic scores in general. Look for guys that are big and strong and fast while being, at that size. Those guys are usually going to pan out pretty well.
Yep. All about those 40s. You don't see Rich Eisen running the 3-cone.
No, you don't see Rich Eisen running a short shuttle either.